Welcome back to Beyond the Blocks. This week we are talking about some controversial changes to faces, new 4K textures that are showing up in games as of this week, an update on age verification, and Roblox's recently released letter to their shareholders. We're also joined by guest Toby, who is known on the platform as OverheadWires. He specializes in product design and graphics, and we'll talk more about that later on in the episode. But first, we're your hosts. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Fedor.
So, what's going on with dynamic heads?
Right. So if you've been anywhere on Roblox Twitter or any kind of Roblox forum, you've probably heard all about this. Essentially, on January 27th, Roblox made a developer forum post announcing that as part of their efforts to shift away from classic faces into their new dynamic and animated face type, they would be removing any non-animated existing UGC faces and porting over all classic faces, effectively getting rid of classic faces as we've known them on the platform for however many years they've been around. They said that the Roblox avatar ecosystem has grown over the years, and the complexity of the technology limits our ability to deliver new capabilities for our users and creators. And as such, they began this process. They provided UGC creators with a tool that automatically updated their existing non-animated faces, but creators have seen really mixed results, especially when looking at faces that aren't really designed to be animated. Like if it's a face that's making a grimace, you can't really somehow make that face like open or close or whatever. That just doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up with what users really want to see, I think, a lot of the time. So, as anybody who's been on Twitter has seen, users reacted with outrage. Primarily, they were concerned about what was happening with their beloved classic faces, especially some of the limiteds that are worth hundreds of thousands of Robux. You know, like where is the value going to go if they're suddenly automatically converted to something that doesn't quite look as good? Many users just didn't want animated faces in the first place, as you know they've liked classic faces so far and have made the explicit decision to purchase only dynamically animated faces that aren't actually dynamically animated and are just user created ones. And there was also a lot of concern about this kind of recurring fear of Roblox abandoning their older aesthetic, which, you know, we've seen over the years as with some people remember like Arthro and all of that, the concern about that. And then somebody surfaced a blog post claiming that Roblox was now coming for R6 and 2D clothing. Finally, sort of to get us up to present day, Roblox has backpedaled a little bit and they've confirmed that, first of all, R6 and 2D clothing is here to stay, and that they have a vision of rolling out new improvements to like avatar fidelity while respecting existing stuff like that. However, they have stayed firm on this dynamic face port. They said that they are working on keeping the classic faces as faithful as possible, making them visually identical based off some screenshots they've shared of all of the faces, and also keeping the limited serial stuff in line, so there should hopefully be no differences to value. And they've finally confirmed that they're working on tools that make this auto setup process easier for creators, but also finally giving players the ability to disable facial animations on animated faces that they have, which feels a little bit counterintuitive to me, especially after they've made this big push. What do you guys think about this?
Yeah, I've never actually even used dynamic heads. Um, I think it's like it's kind of new. Is it? How new is it?
Uh,
Um,
I think they've been around for at this point, I want to say like a year, two,
yeah,
probably around a year. Uh,
but for to replace something like the classic face that's been around for what, like 20 years,
yeah.
with something that's only been out for a year, you can understand why the outrage is there. I think there was also an issue where a lot of UGC creators were very unhappy because they now suddenly have to do loads and loads of work, or their assets are going to get taken off sale,
Yeah.
which sort of raises the question to them. can they really view Roblox as a reliable source of income?
Yeah, and definitely, I think that was like a sentiment shared by a lot of creators. Where I think Creecraft, for example, pointed out that they start out this dev forum post talking about how important user expression and user choice is to them, and then follow it up with, "Oh, and by the way, all of these faces that you've loved, we're getting rid of them if you don't update them, and they're going to be absolutely deleted."
I think that in terms of Roblox is a moving platform. It moves forward a lot, and I think it should be user choice at the end of developer choice at the end of the day. I think that in a way, the best games on Roblox might not have been created yet. And I think that giving developers the option, because we enforce Arthur in our game, which is a really controversial choice, and we've had a lot of backlash, but it works in our game's instance. So I think kind of part of it is, you know, the developer choice really. Does it fit your game? If you want a kind of a classic look, can you add a classic look? If you want to kind of move it forward, do you want a forward look?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do kind of see as a final note on why they're pushing for this. I do see the reasoning for why Roblox is trying to unify their faces a little bit more. I have in the past gone into the avatar and noticed the actual like filters becoming very clogged. I remember back in the day, finding a face was as simple as going head, face, boom, here are all of the faces I have. Now it feels like I'm opening up head, and then there's dynamic heads, but then there's also classic faces, and then the animated faces are different, and like some of the animated faces are created by creators and they're not actually animated. So it's very confusing, like trying to navigate what should be one simple painless system.
This is the unified system that they're working on, isn't it? Though they're saying the singular avatar system, where it kind of they're looking to move all of these fragmented systems that's just been bundled on top of each other into one singular avatar editor, basically. So it's solving the problem, but I guess you kind of have to sacrifice some of that previous look to get the consistency with the newer stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying as like why I see the reasoning from where they're coming from with this feature. It just seems like the way in which they've rolled out has kind of become like the most violent and most, oh, sorry, violent is a bit of a dramatic term, but the most intrusive implementation, in the sense that instead of just, making this automatic tool that just takes all the existing faces and converts them, and then boom, everything is under the faces category. It's this process that requires a bunch of input from users, it requires a bunch of input from creators, and overall is just creates this, PR frenzy that everybody seems to be concerned about.
Hey, so our guest today is Toby, OverheadWires.
Hi.
And Toby is a product and visual designer, and he works on the game Croydon London Bus Simulator. So, Toby, can you tell us a bit about what your role is as a product designer? Because many people who listen to our podcast may not know that that role exists on Roblox.
Totally. So I think for working on a more complex game with loads of features, it can get to a point where those features coming previously stack on top of each other, and trying to unify it and make sure that everyone understands it and there's little fragmentation. You don't know kind of where the player is playing. A player could be in the back of a car on a tablet. Are they going to be able to understand the feature that you're implementing? It's thinking widely about the whole user journey, big picture.
Okay, that's very interesting. And what tools do you use, and sort of how widely do you span? Is it just UI, or are you thinking about how specific models look, or is it just general user experience, or is it kind of all of
So
these things?
I think I do a wide variety of work in myself, kind of specializing in product design, but obviously kind of taking control of the whole visual look and the user journey. Usually, kind of in the real world equivalent of this role, usually it's just one person with a team underneath, but I have to basically be that team. And I think that I've always liked doing that, starting with graphic design and enjoying also designing the parts that not only you do see, but the stuff that you don't see, the stuff that you feel, the stuff that you experience. And only recently, relatively speaking, that I realized that was being a product designer or a UX designer. And I thought initially that I was just being picky about things and how things felt, and I didn't realize that actually that is a thing. If something doesn't feel right, then it's might not feel right to a user as well.
So, Toby, you mentioned that you're a product designer today, but what originally drew you to Roblox as a platform, and how did that evolve into doing what you're doing now?
So originally, I joined Roblox kind of back in 2011, took a little break, but rejoined in 2015, where I found games that I enjoyed. I played with the community members, and it was very developer focused. So everyone kind of had a role within that. I think that product designer specifically, it came into it when I realized that I was able to visualize um, games as a whole, the bigger picture, what people, do as a journey, what people find sticky, what people really enjoy, doing seamlessly. Okay, what kind of taking user feedback, thinking, well, what actually does this person mean? Because they might be telling you one thing but mean another thing. I think the bit that attracted me the most to doing that was the end result of actually seeing something that was initially a really annoying hurdle in the game and turning it into something seamless that wasn't even mentioned. If you do your job well, it's invisible and
Yeah.
no one says anything, which is kind of you don't get the praise, but it's like ideally no criticism about a flow is a good thing. It's a sign you've done a good job.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So this week, Roblox decided one day to turn on 4K texture rendering. So we've been able to upload 4K textures as creators to the platform for quite some time now. And there was some promise that it would be turned on, and that day finally came this week. So now users can finally see those. How does this affect the work that you do, and what impact do you think this will have on the platform as a whole, Toby?
So I think 4K texture rendering is showing a direction that Roblox is wanting to take itself more competitively against other game engines, because visual fidelity has always been I think, in my opinion, the biggest critique of Roblox comparing it to other platforms. So many people will say things such as, well, why don't you make your Roblox game into a real game? Why don't you put it on Unreal Engine or Unity? And, for the most part, Roblox is a really solid foundation, but I think it does lack in its visual fidelity. I think 4K texturing is a big jump from what we had previously to what we have now, where actually I can create a model that is textured in a way that looks just as good as it would be in any of these real game engines, as people say. But I think that uh, 4K texturing will open up a lot of possibilities alongside things like Slim to create not only high definition and great looking stuff, but stuff that works on lower platforms as well.
So specifically, as you work on Croydon London Bus Simulator, and full disclosure, I also work on that game. Um, but how have you integrated 4K textures into visuals in that game? Because many of our listeners may not have seen many high fidelity Roblox games, and does this apply to PBR materials as well?
Yes, it does. It does apply to PBR materials. Back in, I think it was early 2025, I think Roblox made an announcement. It might have been earlier than that, actually, but they made an announcement saying that any textures that you uploaded onto their website basically wouldn't be downscaled as they were previously to 1024 by 1024. That was kind of an indicator that something was going to happen. We didn't know what at the time, but I think in the kind of third quarter of this year, any new hero assets that we were making, we basically prepped for 4K texturing, which, coincided with them announcing it at RDC, which is kind of nicely planned. It means that we can do a lot more because our models are highly detailed, and our player base expect a lot from us in terms of the visual fidelity. It allows us to make things less pixelated. So that sounds small on itself, but when you've got text or you've got controls or you've got things in the cab that are really close to your player, hero assets, it makes a difference whether you can read a logo or if you can read the text on a label or not, or things that were just previously not really possible.
Absolutely, that's very exciting to hear. And do you think there's any uses beyond just like pure high fidelity? Because a lot of developers use sprite sheets, and I'm thinking like if we have 4K rather than 1080 124 by 124, that means you can have like 4 times as big of a sprite sheet, right? And as well with that, quickly, do you think Roblox should go further with like 8K or 16K, and can the community be trusted with those resolutions?
Yeah, so just to kind of answer your last point first, I think that they are accepting 8K uploads right now, just as they announced 4K previously. I don't know what that means, but I think some developers have gotten into a habit of, well, they support 4K, I must make everything 4K. And I think that for sure that might sound good on paper, but you might run into memory issues. I don't know how Roblox will process it. It could be fine. They seem to be doing a lot of focus on cloud-based computing for fidelity. I think going back to fidelity, what you were saying, as part of when we make a model, we have to split the model into loads and loads of different separate meshes to get a kind of a nicely visual hero asset. Whereas now we can just make it at the exact same pixels per inch as we would, or pixels, make it the same pixels per inch as we would, but we can have less splitting, so more efficient meshing.
Just on the topic, you mentioned the cloud processing and part of how that makes the creator experience a lot easier with, avoiding having to split meshes up. I think the goal with Roblox in the long run is to basically make it so you don't have to worry about any of those, hacky workarounds, and you're able to create your assets in whatever highest fidelity you want, 16K, 32K, whatever. And then Roblox just natively takes that asset, and then for every single user that is loading in that asset, it feeds them a correctly scaled or maybe even dynamically scaled version of the texture depending on what device they're on and how close they are to that asset. Because obviously you don't need a 32K by 32K texture map for a boss that's on the other side of the map. And a question that I had for you guys regarding Croydon is, do you guys have any information about the performance, or rather the device specifications of the users interacting with your experiences? Like, would you say that your users are usually engaging on higher end devices that can already handle some of this strain? Or is that something that you're looking to unlock?
Yeah, for sure. I think most of our audience are on higher end devices. It's a very much a split between computer and console, which relatively speaking are, beefier in terms of the performance that they have. Less mobile. I think, Anthony, we were talking yesterday saying that we might have received complaints, but we weren't too sure whether they were actually valid or whether that was just a bug, but we haven't found it to be, since it's been enabled, a continuous stream of complaints.
Yeah, it hasn't been a consistent problem. I think Roblox automatically downscales if it detects you're on a lower performance device.
Yeah, so that'd be really interesting to see if perhaps your game could gain some additional exposure on lower end devices, because you want to keep that higher fidelity while making it accessible to people who can't load in those 4K or 8K hero assets. Sort of on the topic of expanding Roblox's access to lower end devices and bringing in perhaps higher fidelity experiences, Roblox released the letter to shareholders as part of their earnings report. And I don't know if you guys have been following the Roblox stock at all over the past month or so, but it has been in a bit of a free fall following fears over age verification, as well as the release of Google's Genie 3 model, which is this sort of vision of a game engine that is entirely based on generative AI, and you just type in a prompt, and the vision is that it supposedly replaces all other game engines. Now, we're not going to get into the stock numbers or the prospects of that reality, but the letter they released to investors did glean some interesting highlights that I'd like to share with you guys and get your thoughts on. So, one of the first things they mentioned, going back to that topic of higher fidelity games and things that maybe aren't as in line with the current like Lego game vision of the platform, is that they're very, very interested in aging up the platform at the moment by promoting what they call novel games. Basically, they're trying to actively promote stuff that doesn't look like what you think of Roblox. So stuff that's, a higher fidelity shooter or a two-dimensional like scrolling RPG game that I've seen on my today's picks a couple of times. What are you guys' thoughts on how that plays into the platform?
I think certainly for our game, we commonly get referred to as an alternative for platform games off the platform. So I think if you're on the cutting edge of Roblox in terms of making it look a way that isn't default Roblox, having the tools to do that are great. At RDC, I think they showed off a new avatar. It was a glimpse, it was part of the makeup, but it looked different to anything we'd seen before. And I think it shows that Roblox is heading in that direction. And I think if you have a game where people go, this is Roblox? Really? You are going to age up your platform. Most of our players in our game, in Croydon, are over 18. And that's even after the age verification has come through. So we're pretty certain that having a game that is designed and tailored towards that age group does actually bring the results, and that it's not just Roblox is the kids platform.
I think it's great to promote creativity because we're seeing RPGs promoted, interesting racing games promoted. So that's sort of digging into the AAA sort of category a little bit, and shooter games. Obviously, we've had Phantom Forces and some other extremely popular shooter games on Roblox. A little bit disappointed that our game doesn't, as a bus simulator, maybe slightly too niche to fit into one of these slightly niche categories. But I think it will do wonders for if it works. It would do wonders for the platform. And as we've seen, the platform has successfully aged up already through the statistics. The audience doesn't seem to be leaving as they're aging.
When Dress to Impress came along, there were people who I knew in secondary school, high school for American viewers, who never played Roblox before, were joining Roblox age 19 and above, which is really absolutely what you wouldn't expect. But I think that with it's proved that Roblox can be appealing to an older age group.
Yeah, and on the topic of more niche games like perhaps Croydon, not really fitting into what they're describing as novel games, another thing they really stressed in this letter to shareholders was their use of AI, obviously, right? They talked about Cube and their generative AI and all of the stuff that we've talked about on a lot of previous episodes and even in our interview with Dave. But another thing that I found particularly interesting was that in the AI category, they talked about improving their discovery algorithm. Specifically, they talked about improvements in search and discovery stimulating the entire ecosystem and expanding engagement in, quote, the torso and the tail. And how I'm interpreting that is that they're adjusting their algorithm continuously to not only make super hyper viral games like, Steal a Brain Rot or the Tsunami stuff, become massive and quickly spread with players across the globe, but they're also emphasizing these, more niche games like Croydon and connecting the people who really want to see that stuff, but maybe don't even really know how to search for it. They don't quite know they're looking for a bus simulator, but then the algorithm perhaps connects them with that and grows, the game's community and satisfies the user in a way that Steal a Brain Rot really couldn't.
Roblox have recently introduced a new API, I think just days before this recording, that allows you to find lists of players who are in the same age group. Um, so lots and lots of creators have been asking, when these age groups were brought in, how can we make sure our games tailor the experience so that people can still chat together? And we have a custom matchmaking system. We have teams who play together. How do we make sure that these teams can actually communicate with each other? And so this is Roblox's answer. It's quite a difficult problem to solve because you really have to balance privacy here as well, because you can't just provide an API which a creator, anyone who opens Roblox Studio can call and then just find out a user's age, because that could very easily be used maliciously. And with the extra scrutiny under Roblox and GDPR, Copper, it has to be done in a secure way. So the solution they've come up with is actually really interesting. What they've managed to do is have an ID for each age group. This ID is just sort of like a random hash, but these hashes are the same across each place in the experience. They're unique to the experience, so you can't just like collect a load of data on loads of different experiences and then someone works out what they mean. They are generated for the experience, but because they're consistent across places, what it means is you can use it in a teleportation system, which is really amazing. It's really a really, really clever solution, I think. And when this first was coming out, I was like, well, can chat with async? No, it just returns an error. So this is really the only way to optimize your game for text chat compatibility. And there's also a voice chat one coming out soon. Does this affect your experience, Fedor? I know you work on.
Yeah, I have a couple of competitive games that I'm working on or have released in the past where a core part of the gameplay loop is players being able to engage with each other and taunting each other. You run over somebody and then you're able to go into chat and talk about like, haha, I got you. And that keeps the competitive spirit going and keeps players engaged. And if players aren't able to do that because of separate age groups blocking that interaction, it certainly takes away a big chunk of what, the experience of the overall game. And while I don't currently have any custom matchmaking systems implemented, I've sort of relied on Roblox's existing matchmaking algorithm and just weighing the chat signals pretty heavily. I definitely can see it being useful in a couple of upcoming competitive projects I have where we are working on stuff like a ranked mode where we queue players in based off a custom elo system, but we also want to weigh that towards can they actually engage with each other. So it's definitely an interesting expansion, and the way they've implemented it is really quite clever.
What I thought was quite interesting is that you have to agree to specific terms to use this API, because even though it is anonymized, like there probably still is risk of working it out. Like someone with a known age could go in a server, so there are still risks involved. It's not a perfect solution, but I think as well socially, it is important. But how important is it? As important as we realize, because we've been messing with analytics in our game, and running experiments, and I've not found a significant increase in engagement when text chat goes up. So maybe a lot of communication in games is actually, not necessarily text, but just sort of present and just playing with each other. What do you think, Toby? Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting philosophical point that certainly games that have got the matchmaking implemented that I have played, I think generally when you're with people who are in the same age group as you, you're more likely to have the same play style. And it's almost like, am I having a better experience across the board because of that? You know, if I'm not having to deal with, if I'm in the 18 plus age group and I'm not having to interact with someone because matchmaking who's like 13, maybe we'd have different play styles, certainly in a cooperative game. Am I having a better experience? Is it more enjoyable? In some instances, I actually think, yeah, I'm actually having a more enjoyable session because the people around me, I can be a little bit more certain that they're maybe at the similar cognitive level, in if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can certainly imagine it being pretty frustrating having a 5-year-old ramming a bus down your server in Croydon when you're trying to actually follow a route. So I definitely see the reasoning there.
I think even in experiences that not necessarily like natural disaster survival, the experience across the board is just that I'm getting more competitive gameplay because the people I'm with are at a similar level or playing on similar devices. Like I predict, I assume that the younger audience are more likely to be playing on a phone or a tablet, whereas older people are more likely to be playing on a computer or a console. And is this actually, with all the negatives attached to the age verification update, are there actually positives that we can take out of matchmaking players within their own age group?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth pointing out that you could already, with the matchmaking signal update, you could already match people by their age, and you could already match them by the device as well. It's quite a comprehensive system. But I definitely think with custom matchmaking now, because we couldn't access age data, so this almost offers a smoother experience for older players and even younger players who want to interact with people at their same maturity level. Well, that's all we've got for you this week. Come back next episode for the latest Roblox news and features.
Thank you, Toby, for joining us. Be sure to like, share, and let us know your thoughts on this week's episode in the comments down below.
Beyond the Blox is produced by Seb Jensen for Last Level Studios. Watch on YouTube, Spotify, and listen wherever you get your podcasts. And catch highlights on TikTok, Reels or Shorts, my favourite form of short form content. Visit lastlevel.co.uk/podcast for more information.